Sugar's Magic Circus. Welcome. Today, we brought a good friend of ours, Pete Acosta, who's a retired Sergeant Major in the Marine Corps, and he's going to talk to us about a topic that's really interesting to a lot of people because there's some confusion in the Marine Corps over the ranks of, or why there's a division at E8 of First Sergeant, Sergeant Major, and Master Sergeant, Master Gunnery.
And there's some history in that too.
There absolutely is. So Pete's going to talk to us a little bit about his decision to follow the Sergeant Major route. And we do this because...
Well, again, we got a letter. And actually, I got a formal complaint from the post office this week, by the way. I think we're in a little trouble. Because they're tired of bringing, like, dump truck fulls of letters to my house. And it's out of control. But anyway, this letter is from Aaron Kelly. And Aaron says, my husband was a Marine for 4 years, got out as a corporal. So I never really got to understand the part about the First Sergeant, Master Sergeant, how that whole thing works. So could you and Sal please explain the difference between a First Sergeant and Master Sergeant and how anyone ends up as a Sergeant Major or a Master Gunnery Sergeant? Thank you.
But before we get to that, here's the interesting thing. If you've seen this show before, you know that really this is a highlight of Pete's career. So we got to ask you, Pete, how did you end up in the Marine Corps?
Well, my dad was in the Army, and so I was kind of institutionalized to begin with. And growing up and spent a lot of my time in Fayetteville at Fort Bragg, and my dad was part of that mafia. And I knew I was going to join the military. I just wasn't sure what branch. Except I didn't want to join the Army, not because of a bad thing. I didn't want to ride my father's coattails, so to speak. So I went initially to join the Navy, and the recruiter was messing around, and then I walked out. My mom had to sign for me because I was 17, and I walked out of the Navy office, and then I saw this poster of 2 Recon guys with scuba jugs on, totally staged. Now, but at 17, I thought that, I still have it framed. It's pretty it's a poster, Nice. 2 big swole up dudes with jugs on their back.
I'll get a shot of that. We'll put it in.
And then my recruiter came out and he said, you want to be a Marine? I said, well, I'm thinking about going to the Navy. And I said, what them dudes do? And he goes, well, that's Marine Recon. I'm like, oh. He goes, yeah, but you can't enlist for it. You have to try out, and you need to either be a grunt or a communicator. Because you remember back in them days, that was it.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah.
So I was like, okay, I'll be a grunt. So I was pretty easy.
Yeah.
You know,
you were recruiter's wet dreams.
We signed everything, and that was it.
Yeah. So so you were out of North Carolina.
I enlisted. My parents were split up at the time, and we lived in Germany from 80 to 87. So my junior year, that summer for my junior year of high school, my parents split. I went to Chicago to live with my aunt. And so I actually enlisted in Libertyville, Illinois, right outside of Waukegan. Yeah. And then I got mad at my mom, called my dad, and I ended up back in Fayetteville. So I was a courtesy shipment from Illinois to back to North Carolina.
So you went to Parris Island because you're an East Coast guy.
Yeah.
And how was that experience for you?
It was lovely, I'm sure.
Well, my dad gave me some good advice. He's like, don't ever tell them who I am, and just move as fast as you can.
Good advice.
I mean, my dad was an Army drill sergeant, so I grew up in that environment, and it was interesting. It was interesting.
Yeah. So the baseline is set, and off you go. SOI.
That was it. 0311, I made it.
Yeah. For real. Yeah.
It wasn't a huge deal. Graduated SOI, and I ended up in 2-8.
Okay.
That's back when
2nd Battalion, 8th Marines.
2-8 back then had 4 line companies. A lot of people don't realize that. So I started out in hotel company, which was the Hilo company. And my first platoon commander was a guy by the name of Major General Dave Furness, who's now the Division CG.
Interesting.
He was a lieutenant, and I was a private.
That's because the Marine Corps is that big.
Right.
Yeah.
It is.
The same people keep coming back.
Yeah. Good.
Sometimes to haunt you.
Good man. Very, very good man. Yeah. You know? So I guess I started my career with being fortunate to have good leadership, and so that kind of set me throughout the...
It can make or break somebody. I mean, you see guys after their first enlistment, I'm so tired of dealing with douchebags, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
And one of my nephews is one of them.
No kidding.
Yeah. Complete tool bag. Multiple combat tours, the whole 9 yards. He goes, I'm done with this jerk off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And walk.
It's a shame because, you know, leadership changes over time, and if you
It
just
does.
stick it out and get through the tough guys, a lot of times, you know, you get a good one on the backside. And, you know, you can really appreciate a good leader once you've had one that wasn't great.
Yeah.
As,
You know?
as terrible as that is to say, you're right. I got spoiled for so long when I finally rolled into a douchebag, I was ready to kill somebody.
Right.
I couldn't believe it could be that bad.
But Pete, you had leadership billets all throughout the whole time that you were in the grunts as well, didn't you? You were a squad leader and a platoon sergeant.
Yeah, as a lance corporal, I was a fire team leader and then a squad leader.
Yeah.
And then as a corporal, before we went to Okinawa, my platoon sergeant, I can't remember if he got hurt or what, but he didn't make the deployment initially.
Mm.
So I was a platoon sergeant as a corporal for 4 months into that 6-month UDP. And then staff sergeant showed up, 2 months left in the deployment, and then I went back to being a platoon guide, and then got back off of that deployment. Got promoted to sergeant, and then I left 2-8 and went to Recon.
Okay. Now you were telling me earlier that was an incentive for you to go to Recon, was it?
Yeah.
How did that work?
Back then it was called a deferred option, because I had taken NDOCs over and over and passed them, because that's what a lot of people.
So all the Recon units are volunteer only. Is that, at least back then.
Back then,
Well,
yeah.
they still are.
And they still are largely, right?
Yeah.
There's some direct assignment.
It
Now
goes
you can
back
actually sign up with the recruiter to be a
You can
Recon, right?
enlist
You
now.
can.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's changed.
but you got to pass the NDOC.
But you still got to pass the end out.
Yeah.
Well, the way it works now is a guy enlists for the Recon option, goes to boot camp,
Mhm.
and then goes to SOI,
Mhm.
and then goes to BRC.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty sure there's a holding.
That's
Yeah.
just for the guys out there that may or may not know these acronyms. SOI is the School of Infantry's basic training for Marines. And then, what was the second one you said?
The basic Recon
Basic
course.
Recon course.
When we went, it was ARC, then
Yeah.
ARS,
Yeah.
and then it.
And it used to be on the West Coast
Amphibious
and East Coast,
reconnaissance,
because when I was on the West Coast, we ran it right out of Coronado.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, and they've got to get through all those training wickets in order to get the MOS.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So when you think about it, for a young guy right out of high school to go to boot camp, SOI, and pass BRC, that says quite a bit about that individual. I think.
Yeah, I think so.
a motivated stud is what it is.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
at 17, 18 years old, 19 maybe,
Yeah.
you know, for him to make those kind of decisions and have the maturity to stay the course, because this shit ain't easy sports.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about 13 weeks for boot camp. How long is SOI?
The
Now,
11 basic course is
Yeah.
probably 8 weeks, I guess.
So another
6,
8 weeks, and then you got.
11 weeks of BRC, I think.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's a
BRC is a mother.
good chunk of your first year in the
Yeah.
you know in the in
Nothing
the
but
Marine
schools
Corps.
and getting beat up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. Then, so you get to Recon Battalion, and what was your deployment cycle like once you got there?
So I got to Recon Battalion. I was in Charlie Company, and then I came out on the Hearst list. And I can't remember what that means, but
Yeah, it's the recruiter and drill instructor
instructor.
screening list
Yeah,
for
you got
BOs.
Hursted.
so I
Histed.
drove over the main side and was talking to this Master Gunny, and he had 3 ribbons, and I couldn't figure out why he only had 3 ribbons. And he was like, "Congratulations, you're gonna be a recruiter."
Oh yeah.
And I'm looking at the guy, and I'm like, "I don't want to be a recruiter." And he was like, "Well, needs the Marine Corps, blah 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 blah." So I get back to Onslow Beach.
Suck it up, Buttercup.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I get back to Onslow Beach, and I had to go to the S1, but that packet, and the Sergeant Major, his name was Husanita, called me in his office and asked me what I had on my fitness report. And I said, "Well, I had J9G MCRD Paris Island." He goes, "Are you sure?" I'm like, "Sergeant Major, yeah." So he got on the old dial phone, and he called, and he's like, "Yeah, okay, all right, thanks, click. Good news or bad news?" I'm like, "Oh, good news. Well, you're not going to be a recruiter."
That is good news.
Yeah. Yay.
Okay, what's the bad news? Well, you're not going to Ranger School.
Oh.
I'm like, "Why not?" Because your DI class picks up next month. So,
Pack your shit.
and at the time, there was 5 sergeants from 2nd Recon Battalion that all converged at Paris Island at the same time. Myself, Garrett Duncan,
Mhm.
they'll come to me. Terry Hilson, Matt Belinda.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like who's in the,
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
Recon Zoo at Paris
Yeah.
Island, you know. So it was an interesting time. But back then it was only a 2-year tour. So
Okay.
it
It
really
was only
wasn't-
2-year tour then?
Yeah.
What year was
back
it?
then, 94 to 96, I was down there.
No shit.
Yeah.
Huh.
So tell us a bit about being on the drill field. How was that experience for you?
I'm glad I went when I was young. I had just turned 24 when I graduated DI school.
Yeah.
So it was interesting. I mean, it's kind of surreal too, because when you walk into a squad bay, you kind of remember when you were a recruit.
Yeah. And you're on the other side of the fence.
And it's kind of weird.
Yeah, I bet.
Initially.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't maybe about 3 or 4 years ago, just before I retired from active duty. We did an offsite, and we went to Paris Island. And I'm a major at that point, right? I walked down to Paris Island. We're doing an offsite. We're going to study the Ribbon Creek incident.
Yeah.
We talk about accidentally killing people in training, and that kind of stuff. It was a great trip. But I got to tell you, as a major walking into Paris Island and coming around the corner and seeing a drill instructor in his Smokey the Bear hat, I got that
PTSD.
I got that internal my heart clutched up and I couldn't breathe. And I was like, oh crap, it's drill instructors. Even to that, I mean, that's 30 years later. So I can totally understand how you say, it's surreal to be on the other side of that coin.
The interesting thing is though, I graduated my last platoon July of '96, and I've never been back. I've never been to Paris Island. I've never had a desire.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's a part of me that I'm proud of, but at the same time, that didn't define me as a Marine.
Sure.
So I kind of
divorced that thing.
broke ties with it, if you will.
I wonder if it's possible, right? The fact that you were a recon guy first before you went there, that more defined you. Because I know there's a lot of kids, or not even kids, but a lot of young men who go into the Marine Corps and maybe they didn't achieve an MOS that ends up being really satisfying.
Yeah.
So for them, I'm not going to name any names. Like maybe it was supply, maybe it was admin. I don't know. I'm not going to name names of MOSs that nobody really wants to do. Right? But then they go to the drill field and they get something out of that that's completely different.
Yeah, and
so maybe that defines them for the rest of the time.
Yeah, and that's you see those guys do multiple tours down there. We've
Really?
all seen
Yeah,
that.
absolutely.
Yeah.
They do a tour, go back to their MOS, do another tour.
Because they were missing something in their actual occupational field.
And with that, God bless those guys that do that multiple times. I had no desire to go back. I had an opportunity.
Well, it's grueling on you, isn't it?
That's the funny thing. Somebody asked me one time about being a drill instructor, and I was like, "Can you read?" And they looked at me, and I'm being serious. Can you read? Yeah, but then you'll be fine. Train schedule.
Yeah.
If you can read and you can tell time, everything's spelled out for you. And after your first couple of cycles, okay, today's train day 5. We got this, we got this, we got this, we got this. The biggest thing that gets guys in trouble is not meeting a timeline. Mm. Because everything, it's a machine.
And never blow a dental appointment.
No.
Never miss a dental appointment, or your shit is in the wind. Those sons of bitches have more power than a pope.
Oh yeah.
It's amazing.
That's funny.
So.
Yeah, interesting. So it didn't define you, but do you think maybe being a drill instructor might have influenced you later in your decision to go first sergeant major?
No, not initially. That decision was made, not fully, but I was on the fence. I got back from Paris Island, 96, went back to Onslow Beach, same company, same platoon. Then the back-to-back hurricanes blew the beach apart. They moved us to French Creek.
That was been 96.
Yep.
Because I was at SOTG then.
Yep.
But our headquarters was down next to Recon.
Yeah.
So it was all the kids wearing UDTs were in the same place, and those 2 hurricanes hit.
Yeah.
And now to this day it's beach. There's not even the foundations. God.
Wow.
So they merged 2nd Force and Battalion together.
So was this the Shrieg?
It was after the Shrieg.
Shrieg was after Desert Storm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
So at the time, 2nd Recon Battalion was 2nd Recon Company, and then 2nd Force Company. And then they merged together again to make Recon Battalion.
Okay.
And at that time, Force was a company in Recon Battalion.
Okay.
Still did the same mission set. And I was in a platoon. Larry Matvey was my platoon sergeant. And I was a team leader. Went on that deployment. Came back. Was a brand new staff sergeant. Went out again, like right away. Took my own platoon out, and I met Brad Lauder.
Whose name is inside this ring, by the way.
Brad was the boat company first sergeant, and we were on the USS National, the trash boat.
Yeah.
And so Brad really took me under his wing, and to see a guy like Brad, who's a first sergeant, that started getting my mind spinning.
You know, if you think about that, though, Pete, there was two things. One, the history of that breakup. That was after Desert Storm, and a certain commandant, who shall remain nameless, had a brilliant idea to do away with the Recon battalions, and Force will do all the missions. Well, the Force guys all lost their fucking minds. The division commanders all lost their fucking minds. But this guy was on public record as despising Recon. So that was that whole clusterfuck when that all happened. So first Recon goes, finds 3 paths through the minefields to get first Mardiv in the attack in Desert Storm to go up and through. And the reward was when we came home, they disbanded the battalion. Fuck you very much. That being said, the second piece of that history was for a long time, there were no master sergeants in Recon. Everybody was a first sergeant because master sergeants were, I'm dating myself a little bit here, but they were like the technocrat guys. They were in the air wing. They were the admin guys were master sergeants. My sergeant major, well, first sergeant, I was in the grunts, multiple combat tour Vietnam guy. I was a heavyweight boxer, big guy. He said, I'd rather have a sister in a whorehouse than a brother who was a master sergeant. And that's really how they thought about it in those days. Then it kind of morphed because we started, for one thing, Recon is an extremely technical job set. Yeah. It just is. We started using draggers and all this other shit. And that whole thing kind of happened at the same time. We had first sergeants and master sergeants.
So this is a perfect opportunity then for a segue into a little bit of a lesson on what the difference is, right? So it's my understanding. Right? I only got the staff sergeant in the enlisted ranks, but I've been around them, right? So if you want to focus on the technical aspects of your job field, your pathway should be master sergeant, master gunnery sergeant, where you will become, you said a technocrat, but where the idea is that you become a subject matter expert in your field, and you're the go-to guy for the CO.
That was the mentality for a long time,
But if you wanted, and I'm going to say this the only way I know how, if you wanted a faster promotion track and one that was focused more on leadership and was going to expand your understanding of the Marine Corps beyond your current MOS, because you were going to then be available to be put into other units, right? Which is, I think, exactly what they try to round you out in the Marine Corps, right? So you have an opportunity to go maybe to an air wing unit, to a logistics unit, to a recon unit, whatever. And you're focused on providing information to the CO on how to on leadership-oriented type things. Does that make sense?
And so but the problem, the downside of that was, and I'll use Scott as an example. He worked for me as a gunny when we had SOTG. So here's a guy who comes back. It was recon guy, Royal Marine Commando tour. Was on their mountain climbing team. Comes to SOTG, teaches mountain climbing. Picks up first sergeant, never to see the ground side again.
That's dangerous.
It's a very dangerous slope.
But going back to because there's always been a tiff between Master Sergeant, First Sergeant, and Master Gunny, Sergeant Major. And the way I've always, and surprisingly, I really didn't get involved in that tiff. Even when I was on the support side, I got along with my Master Sergeants and as a Sergeant Major, my Master Guns, because that wasn't my realm, you know. But the way I like to look at it, and some 8999, which is First Sergeant Major in the West, was probably going to cringe if they ever hear this, but I'm telling the truth. A Master Sergeant can do a First Sergeant's job. The First Sergeant's job is not hard. But most Master Sergeants do not want to deal with the nonsense that a First Sergeant has to deal with. So, you know, like the Navy used to say, choose your rate, choose your fate. So I chose my fate. I was ignorant when I did it because my first 3 years as a gunny, I had M on my fit rep. And I came back from Afghanistan, and I was the RBE ops chief. Dave Helms was downrange. I was sitting in his office, and a guy named Mark Pylan.
RBE is a remain behind element.
Yeah. So I just crossed. I got back from Afghanistan. Battalion was in Iraq. So I had those guys in the rear, and Mark Pylan, who's a retired Sergeant Major, he's another recon guy, but he was there as first sergeant. He had got orders, and Sergeant Major Bob Terry, who retired out of MARSOC, told Dave to call me. I'm going to sit in his office. Okay. So I was the acting Sergeant Major as a gunny, and I was like, I kind of dig this.
Yeah.
You're solving problems. You're
It's-
putting
yeah.
out fires.
You're just more, you know, the bottom line is, when you do that, you're with the troops.
Yeah.
You're a first sergeant, sorry, you're dealing with the young men. You're
Yeah.
not dealing with technical issues.
In the big Marine Corps aspect, yes. Now, it's a little bit different reconnaissance
Yeah.
and SOF, you know,
Mm-hmm.
which it is what it is. But
It's not the same problems, let's put it that way.
yeah, I remember Carl Froese.
Mm.
He was our monitor at the time, and he had called me and asked me if I'd lost my mind. You're never going to be a first sergeant because of my MOS and tattoos. And I'm like, okay. So it is what it is.
So that's no. You bring up an interesting point. You said because of your MOS and tattoos. Why do you say that? I know the answer, but
Carl, because the first sergeant in the Marine Corps' eyes is supposed to be the epitome of what a Marine's supposed to be. And my MOS being 0321 at the time,
Which is reconnaissance and marine.
right.
the community wasn't. There's not a whole bunch of recon guys that go that route.
Right.
Yeah.
It's pretty rare, actually.
Now
So
there's no.
Yeah.
yeah, but I was ignorant when I did it. And what I mean by that is I knew I would have to leave 2nd Recon Battalion. I knew that. But at the same time, there was 23, I think, 23 hot fills for first sergeants in 2nd Mar Div.
Mm.
And I'm like, well, I'll just go back to the grunts and be infantry first sergeant. And the monitor's like, nope, you've got too many deployments, and you were leaving North Carolina. You've been here your whole life.
Yeah.
So find yourself a schoolhouse. All right. So I went over to SOI East,
Okay.
and they're like, yep. Called a monitor right there, and the monitor's like, is Acosta standing there? And they gave me the phone. You were leaving the state of North Carolina. But you said schoolhouse. Okay, non-infantry, nothing 03. So I ended up at Mardet Aberdeen Proving Ground, which I had
Okay.
no idea what I was getting into.
And what do they train out there at Aberdeen Proving Ground?
Well, that has since moved to Fort Lee, Virginia, but at the time it was armors, machinists, welders, LAV mechanics, tank turret technicians,
Alliteration.
Say that 3 times fast.
and electro-optic.
Okay.
So there was 6 separate schoolhouses, and then they ran the Wolbeck Warrant Officer Basic Course once a
Okay.
year, and then they did the Ordnance
Really?
Chiefs Course. Yeah.
They ran the warrant officer course out of there?
Well, after those guys got their lobotomy at
Yeah.
Quantico,
Oh,
they would
okay.
come
Yeah,
up to
yeah, yeah.
Aberdeen strictly for the ordnance
I
piece.
got
I'm with you.
So the ordnance
yeah,
officers, I
yeah,
got
yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's
So
an MOS.
Yep.
Yeah, I got you.
yeah, but I learned a lot there,
Yeah.
and I felt bad when I got there because I didn't know the Marine Corps had welders. I thought that was Navy,
Right.
and I made the fatal error because at Recon Battalion the armory chief is a 2112. You know, and this is a 2111 schoolhouse.
Mm.
So I went down and asked, hey, where's the 12s at? And you thought I pissed on the Pope.
Really?
Oh, yeah, we don't talk about that here.
Huh.
So that was always
Really?
a running joke when I go down there. I'm like, I tell you what, 12s make guns. You guys hand out Q-tips. I got it. So, yeah, I made friends. Really. Yeah. But my CO there was a guy named Steve Skurnick. He was an LDO major. Made it the staff sergeant, did the warrant officer thing, and then got his commission. That was a really good learning for me because he let me be a first sergeant.
Mm-hmm.
He never tried to steer. He never got in my way with regard to command type things.
So what is a regular what's a regular day look like for a first sergeant in that environment? What are you dealing with on a regular basis?
With entry level stuff is a lot of, I don't want to say shenanigans, but
But it is.
shenanigans.
It's shenanigans.
I mean, you're dealing with young guy, men and women, which is the first time I'd actually been around females in the Marine Corps too.
Yeah.
Which I found from that experience that it's not the females that's the problem; it's the males. Believe it or not.
No, I do believe it.
It was mind blowing to me that how the people, the way they think, you know. But anyway, I would get up in the morning and go to work, and it was really fire and forget because the students were in class from 08 to 1700. So really my only interaction with them would be if I got bored and went down to whatever classroom and observed, or if they got in trouble.
I was going to say Monday morning, sorting shit out.
Yeah.
Who got arrested?
You're
Who's
either
got
checking out the
tattoos?
training
Yeah.
schedule and going around to try to just be around leadership by walking
Yeah.
around, right?
Yeah.
Just being there, talking to Marines. Or you were usually the first sergeant majors, the ones that are in charge of making sure that everything's set up for the NJPs, the non-judicial punishments, and
Yeah.
people who are getting in trouble or getting kicked out or those kinds of things, right? So you're dealing with
Paid
the problem
bitches,
children.
all that
Yeah,
nonsense.
I mean, which, you know, the first on thing is they have a first on course, you know, and it's a 2-week course at Quantico, but they really didn't teach me anything that I didn't know already. It was more like guest speakers and that type of thing. So they really, there's the company first sergeant route is really an OJT thing. So if you're coming from an MOS where you're not really doing any leadership type things, those guys might have a problem.
Oh yeah.
Because they don't understand the process.
Or they forget, or they assume
Yeah.
what a first sergeant does,
And
and it's not right.
so, yeah, I mean, there's not a doubt in my mind I got selected as Sergeant Major because of Aberdeen. That tour really set me up for later.
Okay.
I was bitter, you know, at the same time because 2nd Recon was back to Iraq. You know, a lot of my friends got wounded and or killed.
Oh, and you got pulled out just before all that started.
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
So it was just for him.
Yeah.
It was difficult.
Yeah.
You know, and I lived vicariously through like Joe Bell, because when I left 2nd Recon Battalion, Joe came back to Battalion and he was a company first sergeant. So Joe and I would talk back and forth, and Dan Brown, you know, he was first sergeant there. So I had guys that I could talk to about it, but at that time, this is another friend of mine, Billy Bodette, same thing, straight infantry guy. He ends up being a first sergeant. They send him to Marine Corps Logistics Base, Albany, Georgia.
Yeah.
And it was painful.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just.
Chambers ended up in a reserve unit.
Yeah.
You talk about wanting to suck start at 45.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And here comes this massive stud shows up on their doorstep, and they didn't know where their shit or go blind.
It's almost like a test.
Yeah.
You know, if that makes any sense.
Well, it's, you know, that well-rounded concept has been around forever. You know, but the flip side of that is, I remember before I got to Recon, when I was in the grunts, they started that nonsense, and they showed this Gunny shows up to be the company Gunny in a grunt company, who hadn't had a rucksack on his back since SOI. This is some sort of admin puke-a-thon. He was fucking useless. I was the XO/weapons platoon commander. You got to work hand in glove with the company gun. That's what you do. You got guns to move. You got logistics. This guy was he's falling out of humps. So that well-rounded thing in that particular instance, this guy washes up on our beach. Was the company commander's like, we got to get rid. They got rid of him.
Yeah.
And so, but the flip side is you can get a Scott Chambers at a reserve unit, and he's going to swear that place away.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to take the good with the bad, I guess.
Yeah, that well-rounded thing. I mean, once again, my former community is probably going to cringe, but I don't buy it.
I don't buy it either.
And I didn't.
I think it's stupid.
I mean, I can't complain. I was very fortunate in my career. Things could have went south. I could have ended up somewhere else. And what I mean by that is, in the middle of, you've got all this talent, these guys that come from a combat arms background, okay? And yes, when you pin on a diamond and then a star, you are at the command level. And the master sergeant, the master gunny, actually runs the battalion operationally. But the senior enlisted guy for an infantry battalion, if you got a sergeant major who's a former 0369, he can also advise the battalion commander.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, case in point, I left Aberdeen and went to COB 8. I had a maintenance company.
Combat Logistics Battalion.
Yeah, painful. Painful. And went down range with them. I mean, my company was awesome.
You're moving supplies. You're making water. You're making sure bullets,
Fuel,
band-aids, bandages get where they're supposed to go.
And
Convoys, a lot of convoys.
But it was eye-opening to me too, because I've been a spoiled recon guy for so long. Now having maintainers in combat, watching how hard they work, countless hours getting vehicles out. I also had a recovery section, so these young kids would go out if a LVS got blown up, they would hook it up, snatch it, and drag it back into the fob and immediately start fixing it. So it was a different perspective.
Yeah.
But the leadership aspect on that side of the Marine Corps is so top down. There's no outside thinking, if that makes any sense. I'm so used to, okay, this X, Y, Z, and there it's nope, because that's the way it's done.
Yeah.
Well, the bottom line is when you do stuff like that, like Recon, you're expected to think out of the box.
Yeah.
There's some rules somewhere over there, and somebody wrote them down once, but we don't really give a shit.
Well, you operate in an ambiguous environment, and
Extremely.
you're expected to make decisions about how to move forward and get the mission accomplished without any clear direction necessarily, other than
Especially-
maybe commander's intent.
Yeah.
Whereas
With
Yeah.
young men, too. We're putting
Yeah.
sergeants 20 miles into bad guy land.
Mm-hmm.
Young sergeants with a team of 6 cats, maybe. With esoteric insertion methods. And that kid's out there and alone. And so, so you get used to that. You grow up in that environment. Rules. There's a procedure to do this? No, just freaking do it. Move on. I got other shit to take care of.
Yeah.
And you get, spoiled is a good word, but you become, you run your whole life that way. I know,
Yeah.
ask my wife, we just, just take care of it. Let's go, move. Rules?
Yeah. I mean, there's one of the most interesting things that happened during that. I was only in COB 8 for 7 months. And it was all deployed. I came back and got selected to Sergeant Major, and I was like, thank God I'm out of here. But so that's when they were starting the female teams, the female engagement teams.
Yeah.
Well, I had 5 or 6 females in my company, and they were all rock stars.
Yeah.
And they got chosen to go out.
the lionesses.
Yeah. Well, Sergeant Johnson, never will forget her. She came up to me and said, "Hey, First Sergeant, how can we prepare to go out with the grunts?" Because I believe it was 2-8 they were supporting. And we don't want to be a hindrance. I mean, she's thinking outside the box.
Yeah.
So from where they lived to where the maintenance bay was about a mile. And so I said, I tell you what, Sergeant Johnson, you guys just come up here every day with your bouncer on and a helmet, work your way with a rucksack, and just walk. And that way you get used to carrying that. I was told I was hazing. First Sergeant, you can't do that. I'm like, what do you mean? They came to me. This is,
They asked for a training package.
I mean, they're getting ready to go out and help an infantry battalion.
We don't need dead people over political correctness.
Yeah. So that was another eye opener from that side.
Just real quick, those female engagement teams, that was a program that was designed because when you go out and operate in an environment like in Afghanistan or Iraq, where it's a Muslim culture, you bring the female along with you so that you can interact with the wives and the daughters and the spouses and try to get some more information and figure out what's going on.
Or if you got to frisk them.
Because the males in their culture, you're trying not to alienate them, right? So these were women who were being brought with combat units on combat patrols in order to do that engagement. So they were a tough group of ladies.
And if you look back at it, the female Marines and female soldiers that were selected for that were all rock stars.
Yeah.
In their own right, I mean, so, but yeah, that was an interesting time.
So then you got promoted to Sergeant Major and you went to Intel Battalion next?
Second Intel Battalion.
You went to 2nd Intel Battalion. And so, I'd be interested, coming from an Intel background, so you learned some things about the Combat Logistics Battalion. Did you learn anything about the Intel guys when you were a Sergeant Major over there?
Yeah. Yeah, I did.
Yes, I did.
I mean, Intel Battalion it was a very good starting point for me because as a former recon guy, now intelligence was full circle. So then I started understanding the stuff I was collecting on the ground as a young guy, the process it went through. So it was very interesting. And my CO there was Joe Gross. Awesome CO. Same thing, him and Steve Skarnick, he let me do my thing. Deployed with them for a year, which was funny. Let me back up. So, I get back from Afghanistan with COB 8. I got this cryptic phone call about going to Max Deuce, which was Air Traffic Control Squadron at Cherry Point.
Oh, joy.
And I was like, fine, just get me out of the MOG. Please, get me out of the MOG. So, I thought I was going to Cherry Point. And then I get another phone call a couple days later, and they're like, "Hey, Acosta, are you up?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah." And now I was like 05. They're like, "You want to go to Intel Battalion?" And I'm like, "Yes." When do I need to be there? Monday. This was a Friday. Right? And they're like, "Well, can you make it?" Because COB-8 was on Gulf Street, and at the time, Intel Battalion was on Gulf Street,
Yeah.
right by the bus station.
Mm-hmm.
I said, "Dude, I got a coffee pot. I'll unplug it. I can be there in 10 minutes." So I jumped in my hoopty, drove to COB-8. Nobody was there but the admin chief. I said, "I need a checkout sheet." "Yeah, roger that, First Sergeant." Took it. I checked completely out of MLG. By the time I got there, my Sergeant Major was there. I said, "Sergeant Major, there's my checkout sheet. My dad will be here Monday to promote me, and I'm going into Battalion." And she was like, "Okay, cool." That was it. So
Yeah.
Monday I showed up in Alphas. Well, Cammy's, my dad promoted me, and they had a little formation there, and then I jumped in Alphas and walked right up to Intel Battalion. So, but yeah, I got kind of spoiled at Intel Battalion too, because my master Gunny was a guy named John Lyons. John had an interesting career, 6 years in the Airborne Infantry, 82nd. Got out of the Army, joined the Marine Corps, was a grunt. The downsizing we talked about earlier. He moved into Intel and made it up to Master Guns. So that's when I figured out that the E18 was you can't mess with the E18.
It's a force multiplier for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, you get two E9s together can move the world for sure.
Yeah.
So I was always curious because my interactions with Sergeant Majors have always been interesting. Like, I remember one time when I was at Force, Sergeant Major called me by name, which was like, wow, the Sergeant Major knows me. He's like, "Hey, Lance Corporal Salerno, come here." "Yes, Sergeant Major." And he goes, "Hey, I heard you did pretty good on that compass course the other day." I was like, "Yes, Sergeant Major." He goes, "Good, devil dog. Shoot yourself an azimuth over to the barbershop. You need a haircut." And I was like, how do they get so creative with their digs, man? Like they lift you up and then they crush you.
Well, see, that's like I like to tell people when somebody says, well, you used to be belt fed. I'm like, no, I wasn't belt fed. I just stated the obvious. You know, you don't have to scream and lose your mind over something like a haircut.
Right.
You know, I wish I'd have thought of the shoot me asthma thing. The only thing I can think of is, I think I told you a while back about the cover.
Yeah.
I'm looking out my window,
This is a great story.
and I look out.
This is at MARSOC now, right?
This one I was at 3rd.
Yeah.
And we were in Mainside. I look out the window, and a guy jumps out of his vehicle with no cover on. And I said, "Hey, where's your cover?" "Oh, it's in my car, Sergeant Major." Well, go ahead and take your pants off, too." "Well, why would I do that?" "Because you already look like an idiot, so go ahead and finish just finish the ensemble, you know? So it's just one of them things. You can be creative without losing your mind.
Yeah.
And
So you ended up over at MARSOC as a Sergeant Major.
yeah, so that was an interesting story too. So I was on that year deployment with Intel Battalion. I just came off R&R, because in a year deployment you get 2-week R&R back in the States, which is terrible. Looking back, I should have just stayed the entire year.
Yeah, because all you think about is going back.
Yeah, it's like 2 separate deployments. So anyway, I get back. The monitor came to Camp Leatherneck, so I went to see him. And at the time, George Rabideau had 2nd Recon Battalion, and George's a recon guy. So I said, "Hey, when we get back, I get back in January. I said, let me stay at Intel Battalion until June. I'll do the change of command for Colonel Gross, and then let me post out with George Rabideau at 2nd Recon Battalion." To me, it made perfect sense.
Which is why they didn't do it.
And the monitor said, "Yeah, I can't do that. You spent almost your whole career at 2nd Recon Battalion." And I'm like, imagine that.
Shocking.
Every billet but Sergeant Major.
Mm.
He goes, "No, but there's an opening at 3rd MSOB," which, you know, morphed into 3rd Raider Battalion. So I was like, sure, why not? So I got orders to 3rd MSOB, Marine Special Operations Battalion. I got back to the States in January, checked into 3rd in March of 12. And I was the first star-wearing Sergeant Major in that seat. Before, they had a Sergeant Major, but it was a first sergeant. The MARSOC was still doing the build-up
Sure.
thingy. So 89, 99s were at a premium. There wasn't a whole bunch running around. I think when I got there, I had First Sergeant Meredith was his name, and he was like running all the companies by himself. Yeah.
Interesting.
So, and I originally worked for Colonel Darren Duke. He was my CO, and then Eric Cloutier came in, and Cloutier and I really had a good go with 3rd. You know, it was a really, really good time. I love that battalion. You know, there was a lot of disparities in that battalion at the time because of what was going on in the world. 1st and 2nd Battalion were doing their thing, so a lot of people, I thought, looked down on 3rd for whatever reason, but very, very good battalion.
Do you think that influenced you when you were the regimental sergeant major then?
Maybe a little bit more biased, maybe.
Yeah, I'm asking, you know.
So yeah, when I left 3rd to take the regiment, it was interesting because the guys from 2nd Battalion, a lot of them I knew very well from 2nd Recon, 2nd Force. So a lot of the senior guys, and some of them guys even worked for me when I was a platoon sergeant.
Well, you know, that whole world is that big.
Yeah.
And we all know the same staff NCOs, we all know the same officers, and you just keep bumping into them, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
Because you know who's who in the zoo, and you know their capabilities and or limitations, and that works in our favor for the most part. So to be able to walk into a place like that's a great deal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know those cats.
I do. Well, going back to 3rd is another Acosta-ism. So I walk in Alphas, right, in 3rd, and 2 guys come out, and they're like, "You the new Sergeant Major?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "I need to get up to DS1." I'm like, "Okay." So they walk me up steps, take me down there. And one of them asked me, "Well, Sergeant Major, what did you used to do? What was your MOS?" And I said, "I was a cook."
A lot of cooks have jump wings and scuba bubbles.
Yeah.
What an idiot.
That afternoon, it was a jump, and a guy by the name of Rick Harrison used to teach MDIOC. He's a retired Gunny. He was at the Paraloft when this jump was going on, and he heard some guys talking. "I don't know who that new Sergeant Major is over at 3rd. You know, he's a fucking cook. That's bullshit. He's dual cool and this, that, and the other." And somebody goes, "Hey, little short guy with tattoos?" "Well, I don't know. He was an officer." "Yeah, but he's short." He goes, "His last name Acosta?" I go, "Yeah." Because he ain't no fucking cook. So, well, you know, winning hearts and minds, you know.
Every day.
But anybody can be dual cool, you know that.
Yeah.
It's $11 at the PX. A lot of guys do that, right?
Yeah. So it's funny because there's an interesting thing. You know, a very small percentage of people become Marines in the United States, right? And a very small percentage of Marines become Recon Marines. And then an even smaller percentage of Recon Marines become Sergeant Majors.
Yeah.
So we welcome you here today, Pete. We appreciate you coming and sharing
man.
your stories with us, man, because you're a unicorn.
Yeah.
You're like one of maybe a few handful of guys that have done the things that you've done in the world. I think people appreciate what you've done, man.
Cool.
Thanks.
Sal, thank you.
Thanks.